мною принято решение о проведении специальной военной операции.
We are under attack. It is an attack against Western democracies and on the institutions that bind them.
What Russia's much more interested in doing is depicting the West as a failure.
The regime and President Yanukovych, they were trying to protect their enormous wealth.
This is Kremlin File.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to Week in Review. Olga, we are back.
Good to be back. How are you?
Yeah, good. The pause is over. We're back to business and ready to get into the news stories, okay, that we're taking care of, week after week. The first one that I wanted to jump into is with the European Commission. There's a lot of work being done on the 14th package. And certain things have been achieved. One of them that they're really trying to push hard on is to target Russia's liquefied natural gas industry, because that we're still importing too much of it here in Europe. I know that the United States, for example, has been helping in this regard, but we're still too dependent. So they're trying to curb this part of it. Now, they would like to block the re-exports of LNG. That's what we're talking about via EU ports. Of course, who is it that wants to block everything? Our good friends, so to speak, in Hungary. The spokesman said that Budapest could block the package because of this, but it's not funny, but let's say the incredible part to all of this is that Hungary would be virtually unaffected by this kind of proposal because we're talking about ports in France and Belgium. Okay, so that's where the majority of the Russian LNG gets re-exported. Another thing that they're starting to propose, and I really fully support this, is that the Commission is also looking to restrict Belarusian exports of gold, oil, gas, and diamonds, as well. So the EU companies would like to prohibit, these kind of services that are going through Belarus. Not much has been done, they haven't touched it the way that they've tried, but, we know that Russia works through all its friends, right? Through friend shoring, so on and so forth. So that's it there. So this is, let's say, some of the important news that's coming out of the EU now. But I'm throwing this back to you because you have very important news about Kharkiv.
Yes, I'll actually save Kharkiv in for a few minutes later and touch on this. It is very disturbing that, after 10 years of Russia's invasion into Ukraine, and we're now well over 2 years of the full-scale invasion, that they are still importing things from Russia and dealing with it. And the big news that I have been watching, which honestly is no surprise to me because this is, what I monitor, but there was a report that Russia plans to increase its terrorist attacks, sabotage operations, and operatives across Europe. Now, Russia has been carrying out assassinations, explosions of, ammunition factories, and various espionage operations and operations to subvert democracies across Europe over the past decade. Apparently, Europe is now realizing that they are increasing these operations. Yeah. They are already seeing signs of these increases and that it will only get worse. So can you imagine Russia is going to be carrying out terrorist attacks via their operatives across different European capitals? And this is where Europe is now finally, with their package to stop ban LNG exports. And I mean, frankly, Europe really needs to reset their mindset, and so does the United States, because in Russia's head, they are at war with us. For the past, few decades, they have been at war, but it's been a hybrid war and kind of under the surface. But now they are at full-scale war. Turn on any Russian talk show, and all they talk about is nuking this capital, nuking that capital. We will destroy them. We're going to overthrow this international system and whatnot. So really, I'm happy that this package is coming, but we really need to, one, get rid of all the operatives in Europe and the US.
Yeah.
I mean, and for our US listeners, the report was focused solely on Europe, but US is not exempt from sabotage operations on our soil and from various other operations on our soil. So I think, the West really needs to wake up.
Definitely. In fact, for those who do not, know about this report that came out, there was a featured article about it, and the head of German domestic intelligence is the one that, they had interviewed, apparently, and he said, this is Thomas Haldvang, he said, we assess the risk of state-controlled acts of sabotage to be significantly increased. I can tell you that, for example, last week, this week, on Monday, we had a huge hacker attack in Italy that affected Italian institutions. Giorgia Meloni's office, for example, my university. It was done by the no-name 05716 hacker group, Russian hacker group. And this just, this comes at a time when we've seen the GPS jamming all, since, let's say, at a significant level since December, right, Olga? And also other kinds, of acts that have been going on. All sorts of, in the UK, for example, this week, the e-passport terminals were all down. And this happens regularly. We know about the fires that have been going on in the UK, where they've arrested 6 people on that act. So you're absolutely right. I don't know what's stopping them. I don't know what it is, what has to happen for them to actually kick in and do something that would significantly deter, Russia in a certain point, stop it from doing these things. But,
and a warning to everyone, and I have been warning about this for quite a while. Russia, China, and Iran are working in concert, as well as North Korea. I mean, and you mentioned UK. UK's defense ministry was hacked with data leaked this week by China. They are working in concert together in the United States, in across Europe, and frankly, pretty much across the whole world. So, we really need to have an action plan, and same thing with the GPS jamming. I mean, I don't understand now. NATO is beginning to take it seriously. This began on a Christmas weekend. I remember when they started with these jamming attacks. And what are we waiting for? Russia bringing down another airliner? We already saw that Russia shot down an airliner with 300 plus passengers. I think it would be better to deter them than to wait for a plane crash with innocent civilians dying and then NATO having to go into a war, ground war with Russia. I mean, there are things that can be taken to prevent this escalatory behavior that is coming from Russia.
Certainly.
Back to you.
No, actually, it's back to you.
Oh, yay. Now, you mentioned Belarus. And with Belarus, the New York Times published a report with satellite images showing that nuclear storage facilities are being built in Belarus. And we saw, the news last year, and frankly, over the past few years since Russia softly annexed Belarus, that they were preparing to move nuclear weapons and material into Belarus. Now, New York Times sees that there is actual construction of such facilities. And I think, people have to, again, understand Belarus sits on Poland's border, on Lithuania's border. And what are we waiting for? For a NATO country to get attacked? And Belarus, I mean, Lukashenko barks every day of how he's going to attack Poland and the Baltics. Now again, will he? I don't think so, but they need to learn a good lesson that you cannot do this. You cannot use, Belarus allowed Russia to use its territory to launch a full-scale invasion. Now they're allowing Russia to store nuclear weapons on their soil, and at the same time they're threatening NATO countries. Like, we need to put an end to this, and they need to understand that there is a very high price to pay when you're trying to destabilize Europe, destabilize the United States,
Yep.
and just frankly cause chaos and hell.
Yes, exactly. To add to that, Olga, I picked up a story that comes from the UK. This is to add to what you were saying about, the Chinese nationals, but we know about the Russian nationals. And this week, Rajiv Sile writes about the undeclared Russian military intelligence officer. His name is Colonel Maxim Elovik, which they expelled, from the UK. James Cleverly, the British Home Secretary, that's one I know. The British Home Secretary also announced the closure of several Russian diplomatic premises in retaliation for malign activity across Britain and Europe. So the Russian properties that the diplomatic, that these people had diplomatic status, will be removed. One of these is the Seacox Heath in Tricehurst, East Sussex, and the Russian Embassy's Trade and Defense section in Highgate, North London. Okay, need I say more? However, I know. In Austria, the same thing. Okay. I mean, look, in Italy, half of the property is it's incredible.
I am laughing because the genius, British intelligence came out with a report that we are deporting this military attaché who's a secret Russian spy. Who in the Russian embassy is not a spy?
Exactly. I know. I know.
They just discovered that military attachés and frankly every single person in the embassy. So the person cleaning the floors is a Russian spy. They're all
Russian spies. But you know what kills me too? They don't even mention this stuff. I mean, I listen to British radio all day long, to see what's going on from a British perspective, all right? They don't mention any of this stuff, ever. And it's sort of, like, for our listeners who have, listened to us since the beginning, they know this is what we talk about. And it's absolutely incredible that none of this is mentioned. It's not mentioned in the Italian press either, of the, all of the different, spy scandals that we've had. I'm talking national television, right? Not some local newspapers or some of our friends who are journalists that have brought forward this information. But just crazy.
But thank you, Britain. I'll end with that because they are going after their their facilities. And I can tell you that Russia's their heads are spinning because going after their off-site facilities is like the most sensitive thing ever. So good job, any other country that wants to follow suit. Make sure to close these outside facilities because that's more spy hubs.
Yeah.
So I'll give a quick overview on Ukraine. About a week and a half ago, the United States confirmed what we've all been warning and screaming about, that Russia is using chemical weapons in Ukraine against Ukrainians. They have evidence of it. They have brought the findings to Congress and whatnot. And they Treasury sanctioned several entities that are tied to the production of chemical weapons and whatnot. My biggest thing, I'm happy that the United States finally confirmed that, that Russia is using chemical weapons against Ukraine. My biggest thing is the fact that there's zero coverage. A few outlets printed it, a quick article, but I mean, the use of chemical weapons in war should be a news story. And the fact that there is no coverage shows you how far we've gone to normalize this. And we
Zero.
can never get
Yeah.
to the point of normalizing the use of chemical weapons against, how you call it, in sovereign countries. And that's the one thing. And I mean, I have, on Twitter, try to bring it to the attention of CNN, MSNBC, like they're even for 1 minute, just
Yeah.
discuss that. Wow, we just have received a report that the United States is convinced that Russia is using chemical weapons.
Yeah.
And my goodness, this is how far we've gone. 2 decades ago, it would have been wall-to-wall coverage from morning to night. Now, not even a blip. And that worries me, this normalization.
Yeah.
And the next thing I want to touch on, there have been reports for quite a while that we've been tracking of Russia's planned offensive on Kharkiv. Well, overnight, they attempted to go into Kharkiv on the outskirts. They breached the border and moved in. There are conflicting reports. It was a heavy casualties on the Russian side. For the majority, Ukraine managed to repel the attack. My worry is that this was just, I believe, 4 battalions that were in like pre-phase testing of defenses.
Yeah.
And so we need to keep the next few weeks, keep our attention the next few weeks on Kharkiv, because this is a city. Right now, there's about 1.3, 1.4 million. At its height, 1.8 million. This is the second largest city in Ukraine.
Yeah.
I mean, we cannot allow a bloodbath to happen in a city with, well over 1 million people. And for people who haven't been following, Russia has been priming, Kharkiv by bombing it daily, all day and night. Kharkiv is under, drone attacks, missile attacks. Their infrastructure has been targeted, and there were power outages over the past month, ongoing and whatnot. So, like, we really need to pay attention.
Yeah.
And especially the next several weeks to a month is going to be dangerous. Like, we really need to, I hope US and Europe are closely monitoring this.
Yes, definitely, definitely. And for those who missed our conversation with Mariva Adieva from Kharkiv, okay, she called this out like at least a month ago, 2 months ago. So if you haven't listened to that, please go, all right, onto the podcast where you prefer listening to, the platform that you prefer listening to, and listen again, okay, to what she had to say there. I want to move for one moment to what is happening in Georgia, because this is so, so important. Olga, I hope that we're going to get Edo back to speak about it, or someone from the community that can give us a little thing. I don't have a lot of information in the sense I'm just following whatever she's posting and what other people, let's say our friends, our Georgian friends, that kind of thing. One thing I did want to mention, and then I'll bounce it over to you, 2 things actually. One, the next important date, so to speak, is May the 18th. That will be the 3rd reading in Parliament. There have already been 2. They achieved the passing of these bills, the first and second reading, because they barred certain MPs, okay, from the Parliament itself. They kicked some of them out, and they got it passed. The 3rd reading is on May the 18th. That's the other critical date that we're looking at. It will pass. It'll go over to the Prime Minister. She's already said that she's vetoing it, but the Georgian government has, let's say, overriding powers on that veto. So it's perilously, okay, getting to a situation where Georgia, we already know that Georgia, the Georgian Dream Party, is very, very connected, is basically batting for Russia. They're doing everything that they can. But it's the Georgian people themselves, right, that do not want this. So I just wanted to mention that. These are, facts that you can find online. All right. What would you like to add to this, because there is a mechanism that they're using. I'd like you to talk about that.
Well, I'll start with one thing. And again, for everyone who's watching the 10-year invasion of Ukraine, Georgia was invaded by Russia in 2008. Russia occupied 20% of territory, and they managed to install a pro-Kremlin regime, the Georgian Dream Party. And the one thing I will say, Ukrainians and Georgians, I mean, we've always stood side by side, and we are very resilient. And the Georgia Dream Party overstepped because they will, pay a high price. But at the same point, Georgians have to prepare to pay a high price also, unfortunately, because what started out as peaceful, impressive protests over the past few weeks, they were amazing. I mean, all the squares filled with people singing, dancing, the bravery against the police. Well, that deteriorated very quickly. And as with every Russian proxy, Russia has the same exact tactics. And we saw what was initially done in Ukraine during Euromaidan with the Tatushis who, came out, which are unidentified thugs, in plain clothes, attacking peaceful protesters. We are now seeing this in Georgia. So basically, what Ukraine went through during Maidan is what Georgia is going through right now. The government has raised the ante so much that they are not only having random people picked up off the street as they're walking their dog, and arresting them. They are having every opposition leader is being followed to their house and beaten. You have, hundreds and hundreds of calls to other opposition figures and journalists. I mean, journalists that we all know who are being harassed, threatened with rape, and threatened that their family will disappear. And these are the same tactics that was done in Ukraine in 2013 and 14 during Euromaidan. And then now with the new foreign agent law, they are taking journalists who have worked with international organizations who are known for their anti-corruption, opposition figures, and plastering their faces as a foreign agent,
enemies of the people. That's what they're putting up.
Yep, and they're putting a bull's eye on them for assassination, for torture, for harassment. So really, I am honestly very dumbfounded that the United States and Europe have not stepped in to issue sanctions against, and travel bans against the members of the Georgian Dream Party, their family members, because this is outrageous. I mean, the one thing I will say, and why I'm very confident Georgia will prevail, because Georgia has a very strong civil society. I've always said it. We recorded an episode on Georgia years ago. They have a strong civil society, and all these beatings, all these intimidation tactics will only embolden them and only fuel them and make them more fierce, just like in Ukraine. In Ukraine, everyone started out peacefully, issuing demands to Yanukovych. When he pulled a similar move of suddenly going back on his word and trying to shift Ukraine in 2013 towards Russia, it started off peacefully. Everyone was peaceful, and you had meals and everything, during these protests, until these thugs came in and started beating people. And then after that, all gloves are off. I mean, they will prevail, and we need to keep an eye on it. And lastly, to touch on a thing that from what I'm seeing, it looks like Russia is using their agents in Georgia, now Armenia, and other countries to set off.
I was just going to talk
fires.
about exactly. I was just going to talk about that and bring something up, because I know that this week, and then I'll bounce it back to you so you can finish your thought on that. Just to give a little bit of background, Armenia is suspending its funding for the Collective Security Treaty Organization, right? That it's underwritten. This broke, okay, I think maybe a day or two or something like that. But Olga, tell us about that, because that area right now, Armenia is also, right? There were so-called protests going on, okay, in Yerevan. Can you tell us about that?
So just to give a little background of what's been happening, for the past for a while, there have been tensions in this region, Nagorno-Karabakh, between Azerbaijan and Armenia. Russia used to stand on the side of Armenia, and Turkey on the side of Azerbaijan. Now, what happened is after the full-scale invasion, Pashinyan approached Russia and asked him for help, in this, because there's constantly, in this territory, constantly backfire and whatnot. And it kind of inflames at some points and calms down. So he had asked Russia for help. They refused to provide help. Because they were tied up with the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, and just frankly because Russia does what's suitable for itself. It doesn't honor any agreements. This CSTO is a joke. It's like a fake NATO. I mean, I laugh about it. It's like a very pathetic version of NATO. So basically, since then, Pashinyan's been moving closer to the West. And over the past I'll just get into the details, over the past 4 months, he has basically demanded that Russian troops leave the territory, and I think the last withdrawal happened a few days ago. He has threatened to close down Russian TV channels. He has signed on with a mutual agreement, some defense agreement with NATO, which when that happened a few months ago, I mean, really, Moscow's, again, head was bursting. And he didn't. He went to see Putin prior to the, so-called inauguration, but he didn't go. He wasn't present for a Victory Day parade, I believe.
That's right.
So there have been a lot of tensions building. Also, Armenia has also, gotten closer to the United States over the past several months and whatnot. So Russia sees it's losing Armenia in its sphere, and suddenly these protests by opposition pop up. And like I said, going back to before, it feels that Russia is setting off its agents in various countries, Georgia, now Armenia, to cause domestic instability and chaos. I don't know if they're going to do the same with Kazakhstan and with Moldova, but they may very well start setting off several fires. And interestingly, to wrap up with Armenia, Russian news is obsessively covering the protests, obsessively, with the headlines that opposition demands Pashinyan resign, that they will start impeachment hearings on him. So basically, this is a coup by Russia against the Armenian, government, and they want to install the Kremlin, who's the second in command. And I don't know internal politics of Armenia. I'm just
I don't. I know what I'm seeing exactly.
Yeah, I can observe from what I'm seeing in Russian press and whatnot. And finally, the most interesting point, that there's zero coverage of Georgian protest, zero.
Wow.
And wall-to-wall coverage of Armenian. Because in Armenia, even though Russia is instigating both, because Georgia Dream decided to initiate this foreign agent law again, after the past year and a half, when they attempted to do this, they saw the backlash to it, and it kind of got tabled, and then they again started. But in Georgia, they don't want to show demonstrators going to take their pro-Russian proxies out of power, whereas in Armenia they are they want to show this as painting Pashinyan as the enemy of the state. And the last thing I'll say about Armenia, Interestingly enough, before this coverage, about a week ago in Sargrad, which is Malofeev's rag outlet, this American trader, Scott Ritter, who's
Oh God.
disgusting, he moved to Moscow.
Yeah.
He gave an interview and basically said that Armenia has now become an enemy of Russia, and they will see the consequences soon enough. So basically, in this interview, he laid out that Armenia fell into the Western trap. They have now become, all this propaganda bullshit, frankly.
Yeah.
But it's very telling that the interview was given a week prior to what is now happening on the ground. So those are 2 points to watch.
That's interesting.
We have to keep an eye on Kazakhstan, because now Kazakhstan is mediating between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Tokayev has been on Russia's shit list for quite a while, so I could imagine them, stoking something. And of course, Moldova, they're always attempting to do something, so we have to always keep an eye on Moldova.
Yeah. Our good friend and contacts tell us that no, Kazakhstan is a very vulnerable area, and let's say it's on the list for Russian attacks. So
it has been.
It has been.
So. It has been. I think the first time again was started around the full-scale invasion.
Yeah, in January. Wasn't it January or December when they sent in troops, the Russian, through the CTSDO? Yeah.
It was in January of 22, but then China stepped in and told Russia to get the hell out at that point.
Yeah.
Russian troops packed up and left. But more so, after the full-scale invasion, Russia had put a request through this idiotic CSTO for Kazakhstan to send troops to Ukraine, which Kyiv denied. And then when he was in Moscow in June, I actually wrote an article about it that year. In 22 of June or July, he was in Moscow for the St. Petersburg Forum, which is like the crown jewel of Russia's, of their events. And this year minus everyone, normally they bring all the Westerners, then this year they brought the Taliban. I mean, not this year, in 22 they brought the Taliban, although this year Taliban is coming back to for this St. Petersburg Forum. But that's where Tokayev sat on stage and Putin carried on about, Crimea and Donbass
and that's where he spoke of, and then that's when he also spoke Kazakh. He refused to speak in Russian.
Okay. Yeah, so it's been heating up between Kazakhstan and Russia for quite a while also. And frankly, the Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, pretty much gave a wake-up call to all these countries that used to be held hostage under Russia, because they're looking at it and like, my God, we might be next. This might be our towns and villages being flattened.
It's like you can divorce, but not really. It's like I'm not,
Russia's a stalker from hell. Russia's
the ex from hell. Sorry to laugh about that, but it never ends. It just never ends.
Nope.
That's their mentality. Well, I wanted to get into something that the Lithuania's foreign minister, Gabrielis Landsbergis, said. He raised the prospect, some sort of an ad hoc coalition of Western countries, that's what he was talking about, of sending some, let's say, military training personnel into Ukraine backed by some ground-based air defense, he said. This, again, after seeing that there's much more of a threat of what's going on. We were talking about this before with all of the, let's say, below threshold attacks that have been going on in Europe. This, because he actually said this speaking after a meeting that he had with his British counterpart, David Cameron, in London. And he said that he backed the British Foreign Secretary for saying that Ukraine could use British made weapons. This is great, against Russia. So this is interesting that they came out and said, okay, finally, use ours. Get them over there,
Yeah, so for some good news coming out of Ukraine, the past few weeks, they continue hitting oil refineries and, since the international community has had a problem enforcing sanctions on Russia because they seem to keep finding ways to evade it, Ukraine is taking matters into its own hands, and they have disrupted, a lot of production from sending drones to hit these oil refineries. So that's a good thing. And bad news coming out of Ukraine, more bad news.
Yeah.
Well, I guess this is mixed news. There were two traitorous colonels who were embedded in the State Security Department, and there was a plot exposed that they were working with Russia's FSB to assassinate Zelensky, Budanov, who's head of war, and several other top officials. Luckily, it was stopped. They were arrested. And basically, Ukrainian intelligence has information on who their Russian counterparts are they were working with in FSB. But it just shows you that Russia is continuing, to attack Ukraine from every which way they can, including having agents and traitors, running around Ukraine. Unfortunately, in this position, in this situation, in higher level positions.
Yeah. And also this week, what has been highlighted is Russia's relationship with China. China's been on the map all week long. China's been hit with sanctions by the US for supplying quote unquote critical inputs to Russia's military industrial base for use against war, in Ukraine. US officials announced this on Wednesday, that there's a sweeping package that's targeting 300 entities in Russia, China, and also in other countries, as well. And also today, some news came out that the US has also included 37 Chinese entities to a trading blacklist, due to national security concerns. All right, so apart from the 11 companies that were connected, remember, with the 2023 spy balloon incident, 22 were added to this list because of China's efforts to improve on quantum technologies. So this is something that came out. The last thing I just want to add is that Xi, after 25 years, came to Europe. And there were three, he had visits, quote unquote, in Paris, Hungary, and Serbia. Now I'm going to skip over for the time being everything that, because I know that Macron and the European Commission President von der Leyen met with Xi at the Elysee. They didn't have, the big shindig kind of thing, but anyway, they talked about, of course, China's support to Russia. And they also addressed Chinese dumping, in Europe. But where is that going to go? In Serbia, she was met with banners that were set up, also in Paris, I might add, the Chinese embassy, which was bombed. This was specifically done. This was a Chinese embassy that was erroneously bombed in 1999. So let's say Serbia used this situation. He also went to see his good friend, Viktor Orban. So there, what we're looking at is they had signed 16 new cooperation agreements that are covering everything from cars to nuclear energy. And here we're talking about 16 billion in investment, also manufacturing, reindustrialization of the country. This is where Orban is getting this, let's say, all this cash. They're also expected to announce a new electric vehicle factory that will be built, and they're calling this China's Great Wall Motor in Hungary. And this is where that's going. And Xi, so lovingly said, we see each other as a priority partner of cooperation. We have gone through hardships together. I don't understand that one, but hey. And defied power politics amid volatile international situations. You can't write this stuff. So this was, all right, Xi's visit in Europe. And I hope that maybe one time, Olga, we could get someone on who's a real, let's say, China expert, that they can walk us through maybe some scenarios, okay, about China, because I'd be really interested in talking to somebody. I mean, all I know is whatever I can read in the press. This is not my area. So that. Now, I'd just like to finish off on a light note. I hope that everybody is going to be tuning into Eurovision. I know that most people go, oh my God, Eurovision, with the kitschy costumes and the melodies and ballads and crazy kind of atmosphere. But we do live tweeting on Saturday night, Scott and I, and a whole bunch of people. And that should be fun. We just make fun of everybody, basically. But one of the finalists, of course, is Ukraine. And they always get to the final. They have absolutely amazing music. And amongst the 20 finalists, we've got Alyona and Jerry Hale with their song Teresa and Maria. Absolutely fabulous. The whole performance was great. So we're looking forward, to that kind of thing.
And I'll just go through quickly a few things happening in the US. And then we can finish off this long weekend review. So for good news, because I always like starting with good news, Steve Bannon's contempt to Congress was upheld by the appeals court, so he will be going to jail. So stay tuned. It'll be nice to see him get off his propaganda disinformation podcast temporarily and face some kind of accountability. Yes. Again, he's not going to jail for actual real crimes. And speaking of China, his Chinese partner with him were under investigation for laundering money and various schemes, with the Trump wall project. But at least something's better than nothing. And bad news, and speaking of China, Manafort, again, publicly, it's become available that Manafort, who is an agent of Russia for decades, is now publicly, going to be joining the campaign. He's been seen at Mar-a-Lago. The initial news came out a few months ago. Now, again, this news came out. Of course, he's also very heavily tied in with China. So, we'll see how the Republican Party settles that one, because apparently, they seem to overlook anything and everything as long as it's Trump and his cronies who are doing it. So that's the bad news. And I guess interesting news, the FBI had a new assessment that Russia will attack our 2024 election and become more emboldened and risky because of U.S. support for Ukraine. First of all, I mean, I don't even know where to begin with that. Russia began attacking her 24 election in 22. Second of all, Russia has been attacking all our elections, at least the past several elections they have been attacking. And of course, they are more desperate this year because they need to get Trump back in. So they will do everything and anything they can to get Trump in, including, yet again, propping up Jill Stein, which they have been doing, and RFK Jr. So, I'm happy that FBI has this warning issued, but I think they really need to provide more realistic, detailed scenarios instead of just issuing a blank warning that Russia will, increase their activities. No shit, we know this. I mean, they're off the rails and they're frankly escalating on every front everywhere across the globe. So that is that. And speaking of our election interference, beware of fake videos. There was a video the other day floating around, very interesting. It was with the press secretary, the White House press secretary, and a journalist. The video was a fake. They put a voice overlay. Basically, the journalist in the video asked about quote unquote Nazi Ukraine, which is bullshit. The actual event did take place. I found the video for the press conference. The journalist actually asked about Gaza and humanitarian aid.
Wow.
So they put a voiceover on this video and circulated it. And this is just the beginning of what we will see this year between fake videos, fake articles, and fake accounts. And there are, with fake accounts, a huge campaign on social media, including Russian bots and trolls stealing actual, photos from real people with "I will not vote for Biden." So right now, if whoever's on social media, they'll see two campaigns going on, which is part of Russia's operations. One, "I will not vote for Biden." The other one, "I will vote for Jill Stein." Those are the two operations right now. If you see anything out of the ordinary via media, via written articles, via videos, if something seems off, try to find the original source of it, and you'll see whether it is actually real or if it's fake.
Yeah. In fact, Olga and I will be monitoring, this is especially coming up to the 2020 elections. The
2024.
2024. Yeah, I'm still back there. The 2024 elections, and also what is going on. I mean, we also have the EU parliamentary elections that are coming up now in June, early June. So we'll be keeping an eye on that, and we'll try to include week after week, maybe a little segment on something that everybody should be keeping their eye on. So that's it for our week in review. Thanks for listening in. And remember that the next episode for Kremlin File drops on Thursday, and with a fabulous guest. We'll keep it a bit of a surprise, so that way we'll tempt you to go and listen. Listen in. So Olga, that's it for us, right?
Yeah, just all the articles that for the stories that we discussed will be found in the show notes on Kremlin File Substack. We'll make sure to link everything in there. And that's it. And see you guys next week.
All righty. Bye-bye.
If you'd like to help us out with our independent work, please subscribe to Kremlin File on Substack and on our YouTube channel. Kremlin File is hosted by Olga Lautman and me, Monique Camarra. Our production team is headed by Maddie Kaparov, and the theme music by Oreste Camarra. So please don't forget to visit our Kremlin File Substack for links to our socials and to wherever you'd like to listen to podcasts.